Should I still like Tesla? I used to love Tesla back in the day. I was a huge fan. I was one of the first people to buy the Model S back in 2012. Only 3,000 were made. It was hand signed by Elon Musk himself. I started one of the first Facebook groups, and I was just a humongous fan. But with time, the love has subsided, I have to say. But today, not to worry, I have perfect guests to explain to me maybe where I went wrong, maybe not, but I know we're gonna have a great conversation. Zach and Jesse right here. This is a picture that we took at the Tesla semi-truck unveiling event back in like October. They look very happy there, probably because I told them I'll leave them alone once we're done with taking the selfie. So, but it was a great time. They were always nice to me. As a matter of fact, this is our third collab. The first time we collaborated, it was like back in February of last year when I had like 10 subscribers, and half of them were like my mom, my cat, and the rest of my family. So they've been always nice to me. And you know, they have one of the most popular Tesla related YouTube channels, and dare say one of the most entertaining ones out there. I always enjoy watching their video. It's a team of father and son that somehow are able to have a dull communication and talk about stuff for more than 5 minutes without, like, you know, choking each other. So that's something new for me. So, but I'll figure it out in therapy. But nevertheless, very entertaining. They're very knowledgeable about this, and we're gonna talk about this and some non-Tesla related stuff. And all of this is coming up next. Taking over the world, electrifying the world, people in a track. All right, so if you're watching this on Patreon, thank you so much for supporting the show. This is live. I know it's a bit of an unusual time. I usually go live at 11 a.m., but we are pre-recording this for the next Saturday when this interview was actually scheduled for. But because I still don't know if I'm going to Beijing for the Beijing Auto Show, we just decided to just go ahead and do it now. So thank you for supporting me. If you're watching this on the replay on YouTube, please consider subscribing, so you can become a part of this community. And of course, if for some reason you haven't subscribed to Now You Know channel of Zach and Jesse, I'll put the link there in the description of this video. So now let me also mention that next week I actually have some upcoming guests that I'm also really excited about. Next week, John LaFleur, he is a vice president of a product for Workhorse, a company that I've reported on from CES about their W12 truck, and recently they started delivering delivery trucks here in the Bay Area. Very excited about that. And the week after that, Henrik Fisker is going to be here as well, and I'm looking forward to that. All right, well, so I'm sure you guys are not watching this show right now for me. Obviously, you're waiting for Zach and Jesse, which is, I'm really been looking forward to this for a while. So without further ado, Zach and Jesse, welcome to the show.
Hey, Alex. Hey, how you doing?
Hey, guys. Thanks for coming on the show, guys. I've been looking forward to this for a while. This is actually the video back in February of previous year where we did a collab. So that was pretty cool. Thanks for doing that, and thanks for keeping in touch. So I know you just came back from Europe and you had some fun there. Tons of videos on your channel.
Yeah, we came back from Scandinavia. We traveled all around Denmark and Sweden, drove around in a couple Teslas, and went north of the Arctic Circle to the ice hotel where Jesse and I kind of freezed our butts off.
Definitely almost died. For sure.
That was a fun video to watch. Now, I always follow your Tesla Time News. It's a segment that you guys do about, well, it used to be like Tesla news, like I started, right? But now you guys cover a lot of other electric cars and things that are happening with solar energy and so forth. Do you feel like things are really finally rolling for us, the electric car fans?
Yeah. There is no better time to be into electric cars than now. I mean, you have more choices than you ever have, and more car companies are now coming out saying that they're going to switch to EVs, or at least start making EVs. So I think it's freaking awesome.
Yeah. Do you remember just like 2 years ago, car companies like Ford and GM and stuff weren't even talking about electric, and right. Now they fall over themselves trying to talk about it.
Right.
Ford is still a little behind, but GM, I have to say, even Buick, they came up with a concept the other day. Who would have thought that Buick was going to make an electric car, right?
Who would have thunk that Buick would come out with a electric SUV crossover?
Right.
I mean, it's not out yet, but it looks cool.
The fact that they drew the picture, it's a huge step for them that they even doing that, right?
And it's a whole video of pictures. I think that whole video is CGI, but it's still good looking. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, if they can just change the name and the logo, I'll be on board. So listen, I've you've heard me talking in my intro is that as you probably know, I used to be a huge Tesla fan. I mean, I still am. So just for the record, I still believe that Teslas are the best cars out there, and Elon Musk is probably one of the most important people on the planet because he's actually changing quite a few things, at least in my book, right? Like he's changing the way we do transportation, but obviously he's contributing to saving the environment. He's contributing to maybe fighting less wars and less people dying where we have to get oil, and just changing a lot of other industries and obviously launching stuff into space. And but with time, from just complete blind love for the brand and for him, I started having some doubts. I started not necessarily liking some of the things that he did or the company does and everything. And also there are other brands that are coming out. So I'm wondering if I'm becoming a little bit too spoiled, if that's the right word.
Yeah. So, you sound kind of spoiled, Alex, actually. I mean,
thank you.
You just listed like all of our arguments for Tesla, and then you're like, but that's not enough, that he's going to save the planet and get us to a different planet and save the car industry. That's not enough for you, huh?
And this is where you guys come in. This is why, and we could spend the next 45 minutes agreeing on stuff, but I don't think anybody wants to see that. They can just play our channel side by side and get the same effect. So what I wanted to do is actually talk about some stuff that we probably not either agree on, or maybe I've started to get a wrong impression about a few things. So let's take quite a few things that I know my audience knows that I'm not that happy about, and you tell me where I went wrong, or maybe there is a good argument. It's just maybe not as big of a deal. So the first thing I wanted to talk about is the Autopilot. The Autopilot is something that I've been really disappointed in because one is once they switch from 1.0 from Mobileye version to their own version, and people bought the car, well, they bought a car with a much worse 2.0 version that's only now caught up to what 1.0 used to be. So people who leased their cars for 2 years or 3 years ended up with a worse product that what they were advertised to. And secondly, if I have to, and this is beyond me, if I have to keep my eyes on the road and hands on the wheel, what is the point of Autopilot? Am I not driving anyway? Enlighten me.
Well, I mean, I just drove back from the airport, 45-minute drive. I was in the Model 3, and it was a breeze. It was a fun drive because I got to supervise the car, and I didn't have to do all those micro decisions. So I think you are kind of spoiled, Alex, because I think you're forgetting what it's like. My wife was driving an ICE car to get to the airport, and when she got out, she, having just driven the Model 3 for months, said to me, "Oh my God, is this what it was always like to drive an ICE car?" And I was like, "Yes, honey, that's what it was like." She was like, "How did we do that? Like, how could you go back?" And you can't go back. So I urge you, give your Tesla to someone for a couple weeks and drive a, I don't know, Chevy Malibu.
Yeah.
And then get back to us on what you think.
I'm a little afraid to give my Tesla to somebody with an Autopilot because I live right next to that 101 place there. I don't want any more accidents to happen there. But,
but here's the thing. I mean, the keeping your hands on the wheel, eye on the road thing, I think is a real challenge for people. I think that some people, like, they are way too willing to trust things, and they're probably way too willing to trust other people, but it just hasn't like come to bite them in their life yet. But if we've done hundreds and hundreds of miles, probably over thousands of miles in Autopilot. And we put it in Autopilot, and I usually keep my hands on my lap, right on my knees, where I can actually grip the steering wheel down below. It's just sort of sitting right on my lap, and so I can look forward, and I can be looking all around. And I think that
you're not using an orange?
I don't think that the orange. Yeah, again, it's this blind trust thing. It's like you have a computer that's basically just sort of a guidance aid. It just keeps you in between two lanes and a space between the car in front of you if everything is going right. And as soon as you understand that, then I think you can understand what autopilot is. But I mean, I think that the worst thing that Tesla probably did was calling it autopilot.
Yeah.
It's the worst and best thing because, I mean, on the one hand, yes, it is not like a perfect...
it should be called auto helper.
I mean, it's a lot like an autopilot on an airplane. I mean, or at least the ones that I've learned on a Microsoft simulator, Flight Simulator 2005 or whatever. You put it into autopilot and it kind of maintains what you're doing, but it can't handle anything that complex. And so, I mean, I know what you're saying about the going from 1.0 to 2.0, being kind of like, for a while, it was pretty bad for a lot of people. And we didn't get to feel that, obviously, because we were in Sparky and Sparky only has 1.0.
Me too. Both of my Teslas have 1.0.
Okay.
We just got back from Europe where we were driving the latest 2.0 hardware that had just been updated, and it was amazing. The latest update could handle stuff that regular 2.0 couldn't handle before. So, right. I mean, it's already getting amazing. And I think we're also forgetting that this is a transitional thing anyway. We're in level 2. The whole point is to get to level 5 as fast as possible. We don't want humans involved. When humans are involved mixed with computers, it's not a good thing.
Right.
We want to get to level 5 where the car is completely making the decisions. And unfortunately, that's just going to take some time to get there. But I think we're going to be very surprised when Elon comes out with his new release of Autopilot, the one that's supposedly going to be able to drive from LA to New York. I mean, I think that we are just a little spoiled right now because we would like it to be Autopilot level 5 immediately.
Right.
And it's just going to take a little time to get there.
Right.
Yeah, okay, so it looks like we agree that calling it autopilot, which is actually exactly what planes do. You don't completely hand over control to the airplane. But I think the overall general perception is that autopilot means that your car is driving yourself, right? And I think that's a lot of people, and perception is reality. Even if 20% of people think that autopilot is where, that's too many, right? So it looks like we agree on that. I still think that if I was one of those people who leased a car for 3 years with the autopilot, seeing what my neighbor has, like me and you with 1.0, and realize that I don't have any of those features and they're not getting better, I would be pretty pissed off if I paid, what I don't know, it was like an extra $5,000. So that's my, I think, biggest thing, where they didn't really communicate that, hey guys, just so you know, this version is a little different. You're
absolutely right. I mean, when you go to pick up your car, they do not tell you what autopilot can and can't do. They just let you go. I mean, I've never heard of anyone getting a really good explanation
right.
at the showroom. They do. I don't know why they do that.
I think I know why. It's because a lot of the people who work for Tesla in showrooms or just in general don't drive Teslas for it's unfortunate. I feel like as soon as you start working for Tesla, you should get a Tesla for a week. And they should just be like, go drive it for a week.
Yeah.
And I think that experience for us, being able to, like, when we first got Sparky and just like, we got in the car every day. We were just like, where do you want to go? I don't know. Let's start driving. Let's just see where we go. Let's put it into autopilot, see what autopilot can do. And we're like, wow, this is really good. And also we know what it doesn't do so good on. I feel like if they actually would train their employees at service centers and showrooms just by giving them a car and being like, have at it, I think that not only would you'd get a better explanation, but they'd sell more cars.
Yep.
And I think the same thing also goes for selling the cars. I mean, I think that they need to put the people who think they want to buy a car in a car as fast as possible.
Yep.
Yeah. So, all right. So granted, and I like I said, I kind of agree. I am, and a lot of us are a little spoiled, and we obviously want to get to level 5. Some of us don't. I know some people just love to drive. I personally do like to drive as well, but I just wish they were a little bit better at communicating, especially, obviously Elon Musk doesn't really shy away from communication. So if one of the tweets would be maybe, not about Tesla Kilo, but more about understanding what the autopilot is, maybe there would be a little bit less people that are frustrated with what it is, like myself. But That's I think it is what
That's
it is.
what our channels are for, though. We're supposed to be educating the people.
Yeah, and I mean the other thing too is that I think Elon has gone into this going for the long haul with Tesla. I mean, this was not some like short term, like I'm going to make this company and then sell it kind of thing. Like he was like, this is what I'm going to do. This is my long-term project. And so that's the way he views it. And I think that that's the way that he expects everyone else to view it, as this long-term, investment of like, I'm going to buy a Tesla and then I'm going to have all the updates come. Like he's not really, I don't think that he cares about the people who are leasing his cars. He cares more about the people who are buying his cars.
Ooh. What would be the difference? Because I mean, to Tesla, like any manufacturer, leasing is the same thing. They still get the money from the bank. The leasing versus buying option is really just between the customer and the bank. I don't see how Tesla is any better or worse off on a lease.
I don't think it's not a Tesla thing. I think it's more of an Elon thing. I think that the way that he feels is that like, if you want a Tesla, like you're there for better or for worse. I mean, it is that way. I mean, with the Autopilot updates and stuff like that, when you bought or leased that Tesla, you were basically saying, I'm gonna bear with you for this period where you're scrambling to invent a new Autopilot system that you didn't think that you needed because you thought that Mobileye would make it for you. I mean,
the reason I lease my cars actually. The very reason is because how fast they're moving with technology. So both of my Teslas are leased because I don't want to be in them for more than 2 or 3 years because they're going to get so much better. I want to get into a newer one. So that's the reason I lease. And I would hope that they would want me to continue leasing,
Yeah, I kind of agree with you, Alex, is that when they switched from Mobileye, that wasn't a planned event. I mean, they thought that they would have a long-term relationship with Mobileye. And when they switched, I think Elon thought, oh, I'll catch up to them in no time.
Mm-hmm.
And
Elon should know that not all long-term relationships last, correct?
You're right, he should know
that. Out of all people. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
But yeah, I think he underestimated. I think he thought that he would get up to, Autopilot 1 speeds right away, and it took him a lot longer. But to his credit, he was inventing a brand new technology, and he got there pretty fast.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to another one, which I just went to my Tesla adventure. We met one of the largest superchargers in the U.S., Kettleman City, this was one of the first time I've supercharged in a while because supercharging is still a tough sell for me. I mean, granted, it's free, but for me to make a trip from here, I'm in San Francisco Bay Area, to Los Angeles, for example, that's 5 hours. If I have to supercharge, that makes it 8 hours because not only it takes a while, but also sometimes there are lines, especially here in California. You have to wait for your charger, and it's to me 5-hour drive is barely bearable. Like I can still have enough conversations with myself and listen to enough music to barely make it, but 8 hours is too much. So I've admitted many times when I travel, I rent a gas or hopefully hybrid car if they have it available, because I just don't have time to be that environmentally friendly to spend that much time on superchargers. And this is not even a Tesla problem, right? Tesla is way ahead of everybody in supercharging. There's only now other fast charging networks coming up. But is it an oversell to imply that long distance travel is better in a Tesla than, let's say, in a gas car because there are superchargers?
I mean, so we've traveled, we did a trip out to San Francisco from the East Coast, 8,000 miles, 25 states. And then we did one down to Key West where we did that, 32 superchargers.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're well versed in it. And you're right, it does take extra time. In terms of lines, we've only encountered, I think, one time line, and that was in your neck of the woods. And so
it was at the San Mateo supercharger. And that was the only one we've ever had a line at.
Don't get me started on that one. That is the worst.
And I'm sure if you live nearby one that has lines constantly, I mean, that's something we can't really even imagine.
But I do want to point out, you're in this little magical part of the world where there's just so many Teslas you can't shake a stick without hitting one. The rest of the country and the rest of the world, pretty much, you're not going to encounter that kind of line. So I It's too bad that your trip down to LA, you're going to be hitting pretty much lines at all the superchargers. But let's pretend that you didn't for a second, and let's just pretend it was just supercharging time.
Tell it to my lack of sleep.
So if it was just supercharging time, what would your trip be? Would it be more like 6 hours?
So it's 5 hours versus 8, and I have to say I'm actually going to be moving to Sacramento, and that's where it's literally almost doubling it, because the Vacaville superchargers, where I need to charge, is actually it does have a line, because it also has like a really cool outlet mall. So we're talking about like hour and a half versus 2.5, 3 hours.
But if you removed the line, if you were in our neck of the woods, let's say, and you were doing a trip, I don't know what's equivalent 5 hours, New York, Boston, New York, something like that, where we don't hit lines. So it's just the time it takes to charge, and it's usually 25 minutes or something.
Right.
We kind of like that, because that's time for us to go to the bathroom, get a drink. I mean, after sitting in the car for 3 hours.
Right. And it's usually spaced every 200 or so miles. Let's say you're lucky and you didn't hit any traffic, so you're going about 60 miles an hour. It's a mile a minute. That's, it's like over 2 hours of in the car time. It's like, it's time for me to stretch my legs. Like, it's time to get out of the car.
And the other thing is, the Model 3, we have a 320 mile range. That car, I wonder if that would change your opinion of driving to LA, because I feel like you'd have to stop less times to supercharge.
Or you could be more picky about where you wanted to charge. You could be like, I'm going to skip that one that always has a line, hit the one that doesn't.
Right. No, I agree. Obviously, the longer range your car, the bigger range your car has, the less supercharging you would have to do. But in my case, for example, I had a choice between having a 300 plus mile Tesla Model S or two shorter range Model S's, and I picked two because I don't travel that much. And by the way, another point I wanted to make is that when I had before that, what I had a BMW 7 Series, right? I never took that car on to LA either, because why in the world would I want my baby to be hit by all kinds of crap from semi-trucks? I would always rent a car anyway, just to go back and forth on this, highway with all of that crap falling on it.
That's why we need Hyperloop, Alex. Or I have another solution for you, which is the Tesla semi-truck with a range of 500 miles fully loaded.
Right.
Unloaded, I'm sure you can make it there and back without any charging.
And it costs about the same as a Model X.
Yeah. So
you guys actually reserved one, right? You guys have one on a reservation.
Yeah, we're number 65 on the list, so we're getting
nice.
One.
So what are you going to do with it?
We're going to drive to LA and San Francisco.
Everything. We're going to do everything with that truck. It's going to be ridiculous. We have so many crazy plans of trailers and trips. It's
mobile jazz club, pop-up club, you name it.
Some kind of paintball thing.
If you've thought of it, we've thought of it.
But okay, getting back to the superchargers though. I mean, I think that fundamentally we're a bit opposed here, because I'm never ever going to step foot in another ICE car as long as I can possibly try to, because it's just a different. I mean, I don't know how you can get in one and drive
painfully. Well, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, the difference is that, I hate gas stations. I hate using gas, and those cars suck. But that's 3 hours of sleep. And I will, most of the time, having two jobs, really, I always choose sleep over almost everything. And I don't disagree with you how much I dislike. And a lot of times when I do have a chance to get a hybrid car, I get a hybrid car because it's still a little bit better. And by the way, I'm not really like, I'm saying me, not so much me, but more like a more of a regular common folk, because I like the environment, but most people don't give a crap about the environment. They got bills to pay, they got places to be, they might be visiting a family in LA or whatever. They don't have time for the environment. They want to do whatever is either faster or cheaper, right? So when I say me, don't think Alex. Think of more of a regular person who's got other things to worry about than making videos for his YouTube channel or saving the environment. Those are the people who
okay, one thing that I will say, and this does relate to Autopilot, when we used Autopilot, we were able to get much further in a day than we were if we were to have to drive it, because at the end of the day, we were not as so just drained and exhausted, because driving, especially long distances, you're just going to get fatigued, especially if there's any kind of traffic whatsoever. And I mean, I think that what traffic is coming from.
Yeah, because I want to ask you. So if you eliminated the waiting time at superchargers because of full ones, and I'm guessing your trip would be more like 6 hours. If you had the ability to use your AP and it took you an extra hour, I would think that would be way better than driving an ICE car, getting stuck in traffic, having to do brake, gas. I mean, wouldn't you rather lose that hour but gain that AP?
Right. I mean, where it comes to supercharging, and if there isn't enough in your area and it's at capacity and you have to wait in lines, I completely agree. That is beyond where I would want to actually deal with it. I mean, driving a Leaf, it's a huge pain because practically every charger, there's some Volt or some stupid plug-in Mercedes SUV plugged in with, just sitting there at the mall when, they could easily drive home with their gas. This is my own little rant, but they can drive home with their gas tank and I can't leave until they leave and I charge for 3 hours. So I totally understand what a huge pain it is to have to wait for a charger. But when it works, and trust me, on the East Coast, oh boy, does it work. It's fantastic. I mean, when you get obviously when you're at a full supercharger, you're not getting the full speeds as well. So, I mean, you waited in line and now you're getting a slower charge rate, which sucks. But when you go to an empty supercharger and you're getting, 130 kilowatts and you're topped up before you even know it, I mean, it's great.
So basically we're saying, Alex, move out here to the East Coast.
It's way better.
I am moving to Sacramento, but one last point.
Not enough. That's
not enough. Okay. No, but last point. So I did drive last night. So here's a great example. I left the event at 11 o'clock and it was at Avila Beach. So it's about a 3 hour drive home. If I was in a gas car. Now I ended up having to make a trip in 4 hours and 15 minutes or 20 minutes. Now for a few reasons. It was cold. I had to run a heater and my lights, obviously. So when I charged for 100 miles rated, that actually got me about 55 miles driving on the freeway. So I ended up having to supercharge. Now superchargers were all empty. Like literally I've seen one Tesla in like 3 superchargers, but nevertheless it's 3 hours versus 4 hours 15 minutes. I got home at 3:15 versus 2 o'clock, and that made a big difference. So obviously this is a personal preference. I guess what I'm saying is I think there are quite a few people who have my preference who maybe don't care about renting a gas car once in a while and maybe not even as disgusted as I am by that or ashamed of it. But it's realistically a better choice for them. So I hope that Tesla and other fast charging networks that are coming up are going to solve that problem, because I always say this. We can have our love fest about electric cars or Tesla, whatever, all we want, but the numbers are there. Only 1% of car sales in the world are still electric, and they're not growing that fast. I think last year or the year before, only 17%, I believe, and as far as charging stations as well, we're not making that much progress. That means there's 99% of people who still believe that they'd rather drive a gas car.
But here's the thing.
Distance.
Yeah, you're seeing the beginning of a curve. This is the same beginning that we see to any S curve. So whether it's beginning of cell phones or the beginning of automobiles back at the turn of the century. And it's hard to picture how fast that's going to change. But let me just point this out to you. The Model 3 in Q4 of this year could become a top 10 selling car in its class in the United States. That means it could start to bump off cars like the Camry, the Corolla, the Civic. And then next year, it's almost undoubtedly going to become a top 10 car, maybe even a top 5 car. When that happens, everything's going to change.
Right. And I mean, there are going to be people who are like, well, this just can't possibly fit my lifestyle. And I think that there's actually going to be a portion of those people who are going to see the advantages, see the cost advantages, say, of, oh, wow, this is going to be so much cheaper for me to drive so many miles. Or Autopilot, wow, that's great. I can't believe that I drive so many miles, and maybe that's good for them. Or maybe they say, you know what? Oh, charging, that's too long. But I think in the coming years, with the newer and better battery technology that is on the horizon, it's really exciting, the charging speeds and the capacities that we're going to be able to have. I mean, it's not too unreasonable to imagine, like a 500-mile range car.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
and charging up in 10 minutes or something like that. I mean, then you're really on par with gasoline in terms of the charging time.
What we're driving now are the flip phones of cell phone technology. Like, remember when the first cool phones came out and you're just like, oh my God, I have a flip phone.
Right.
That's what we're driving now.
And I'm not even driving that. I'm driving a brick.
Yeah.
I'm driving the one with the antenna.
The Nokia, right? You're driving the
But
Nokia.
I'm saying, like, yeah, we're way before anyone else is going to, before the later adopters, the grandmothers, if you will,
Right.
of adoption, if we're talking cell phones. But it will happen, and it needs to obviously get better, and it will. And maybe it's not this generation of electric cars that ropes them in, but it's going to rope in a lot of people because, I mean, you seem to travel. I mean, those distances are pretty far, and a lot of people do not travel that far. I mean, let's be
True.
real. Like,
yeah, I don't travel that far very often either.
Right, and in those cases, I think that it's great that your car can drive that far, because I mean, I'll be honest. My car having to do a 5-hour drive, forget it.
Right.
Forget it. I just couldn't. I couldn't do that in a Leaf.
Well, and I want to point out, when we were just in Copenhagen, we got to drive in 4 original Tesla Roadsters. And this was one of my first times in the original car in any kind of long trip. Mm-hmm. And I was so surprised at how much the technology's changed just since those cars have come out. And that's only a few years. And now, I don't know, that they're not that sexy to me anymore. Like, the design is, but the actual cockpit and the experience, the fact that you can't supercharge in them, the fact that they have, that their batteries aren't as good, like, that has all changed within a very short amount of time. So I can only imagine what's going to happen to these cars just in the next few years.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Now, before we go any further, let me just remind my audience that this channel is sponsored by Evanex, the aftermarket accessories for Tesla. Actually, I'm just gonna do the unboxing myself. If you guys are looking to shop at Evanex, you can grab a discount code in the description of this video. So thank you to them for sponsoring this channel. Okay, back to Zach and Jesse. We're going to bring up another topic that I'm kind of wondering your opinion about, because we're talking. I want to talk about Elon's tweets, right? Like, on one hand, I thought it was kind of cool at first that he was replying to people on Twitter, being transparent and everything. About a year ago, I actually called him out about the Project Love Day BS stuff, and he replied to me, which I thought was weird because, again, 10 subscribers, just regular dude. Why is he replying to me? Isn't there a better topic and person to talk to? But lately, I've noticed that his tweets have been, I call him kind of Trumpish, right? And the reason I say that is because even people who like Trump, they don't like his tweets. Like, I'm gonna bring one of them up right now, and just I want you guys to comment on this one, because I was a little surprised. This one is you just did a coverage on this one as well. It was very recent. Here's the one that he's replying to The Economist, that quoting Jeffries Bank, saying that the Tesla will have to raise a few more $1 billion, and he's saying, well, The Economist used to be boring but smart with a wicked dry wit. Now it's just boring. Sigh. Tesla will be profitable and cash flow positive in Q3, Q4, so obviously no need to raise money. This tweet bothers me on so many levels I can't even stop. But let me ask you first. Does this bother you that Elon Musk, the guy we both admire a lot and a CEO of this company and SpaceX and many other absolutely amazing projects, tweets like this?
For me, I mean, he has been dragged through the dirt basically since the founding of Tesla. I mean, at every turn, it's either like Tesla is just sort of this little oddity, this sort of like, oh, look at this funny chap. And then they, go on and talk about other crap on the news, or they just absolutely attack Tesla and Elon Musk, usually personally, about just whatever they can come up with, practically. Well, we've been covering it every single week for about 2 years now, and it's insane the level of absolute BS that they can just pull out of nowhere.
Well, and this kind of goes to it. The fact that they get to point to a bank and say, oh, so this is real numbers. You'll definitely need to raise money this year because a bank said so. Let's be honest. The bank is just some analyst in the bank. And that analyst, if you look at most of the analyst numbers, they're usually wrong more than half the time.
Right.
So we could either use a dartboard, or we probably know better than those analysts because we cover them more often.
Right. And it's annoying because none of them talk about any of the things that Tesla is that are amazing. I mean, the fact that it is a new car company, There hasn't been one in a very long time. The fact that it's all electric.
The fact that they've delivered on pretty much everything they promised.
Right.
I mean, might be a few weeks late here or there, or like my car was a year late, but they've delivered on everything they promised. And yet they're always held to, oh, they're always late. You know, the autopilot doesn't work exactly the way they said it would.
Right. I mean,
well, you're running a little ahead of me. I had a question about that, but okay, maybe I can clarify. Let me tell you what it bothers me about this particular tweet, and there are quite a few of them very similar. First of all, my suggestion to him is that, listen, you're a CEO of a publicly traded company that's now worth more than some of the traditional automakers. You're gonna have little. It's a family show, but bankers and whatever trying to talk crap and lie about you. You have to have a thicker skin than that. You understand that this is going to be happening, and there are ways to address it. One of them could be just ignoring it. Two could be coming up with an official statement. Three could be having this information as part of your quarterly report or any type of other official information that you release. Instead, you decide to tweet, and now you're calling them names, right? Like, I don't care what you really think about The Economist, and maybe he's right, but your message always gets lost, no matter how good it is, when you start throwing mud at the same time. So that's a second point. But third, and this is more of a economy point to make, the company can be profitable, but still it is okay to raise money. So for example, let's say Tesla is profitable in Q3, but they still decide to raise money to ramp up the production for Model Y, and there's nothing wrong with it. Amazon has done it for a decade before becoming this humongous company. So those three things that bother me in just one tweet, but this lack of a bit of a class here is what bothers me the most. So what say you to this?
Oh, I actually thought it was a pretty classy tweet, because I mean, unlike some other world leaders that we know that just tweet out like insane statements, this one had well thought out a verse to it, and the fact that he talked about I like that he worked in the little boring part to it. But keep in mind that Elon got one thing in his favor, which is that when he tweets, it's going to get some news coverage. If he were to put out a Tesla boring statement, there would be no coverage of that whatsoever. So he, I think, has to weigh those two. You're right. He could be a little bit more diplomatic, but he'll get no coverage if he does that.
Right. And at the same time, I mean, he's not one of these boring CEOs who puts out a press statement. He's never been that way. He is in the trenches of his own company. And I mean, love it or hate it, he's going to like address things personally, because he's pretty personal. Like he takes all of like the worries of humanity's like problems pretty freaking personally, so much so that he, almost personally bankrupts himself when, Tesla almost goes under. And I mean, like, yeah, this is me sort of fanboying and defending Elon just on a pure character basis. But I mean, it's not like he's calling them fake news. He could have said that's fake news. But instead he, took it pretty classy for when they're basically saying Tesla's going to go out of business or need to, saying something that he believes is false.
Well, and he came out with numbers saying that he's going to hit these production numbers. And if he does hit those production numbers, they're not going to need to raise money.
Right.
Yet all of these analysts keep saying, oh, he's not going to hit those numbers. How do they know?
Right. And the last point, I think, is that it is Twitter. And I think that we all are probably a little bit desensitized to it, whether it is from Trump's Twitter page or just in general. I think that Twitter has this sort of snarkiness to it because you are limited to, to a certain number of characters. There's a lot of sniping and a lot of snark on it.
Whether there could be more. Great.
or anything like that. I mean, it's that's kind of how it works. But I mean, and at the same time, this is kind of his personality. So I mean, I'm not surprised. And I mean, to your point on the Trumpish behavior, I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't really compare it to Trump because, again, he's not saying anything crazy.
Well, so there are other tweets, as I mentioned. So one of his tweets was about the NTSB, the investigation, and disclosing information that didn't want to. Well, now they kicked him out of as a party to investigation. As a result of that, the tweet was one of the main reasons, because he called them out on Twitter. Now, I hope you agree with me that the Tesla not being a party to this investigation can damage the PR and the image a little bit, because obviously when you're part of the investigation, you get to know a little bit more and be prepared to do some damage if you have to, but also be able to cooperate with them and maybe even influence a little bit the outcome of that. So is tweeting that out was worth Tesla no longer being party to this investigation and possibly having a worse outcome of this than they otherwise would have had?
I don't know. I mean, maybe if he had known ahead of time that would have been the result, maybe he wouldn't have done it. But I mean, his reasoning for tweeting that out was that he wanted the information to get out sooner rather than later. And as he pointed out, with NTSB, it would probably take about a year. So to let us drivers who are driving the car now know what the problems are now, I appreciate that. I hope other drivers do too.
And
granted, absolutely. And I just want to say, I agree with that. I disagree with the NTSB that they, but by the way, those were the rules that Tesla agreed beforehand. I don't like the rules, but what I was saying is that tweeting that out, because they basically told them to, mind their own business, even though that was part of the contract, that as you become a part of an investigation with NTSB, and that's what they basically took offense to. So I'm just not sure if it was worth it for him, the investors, the customers, and so forth.
I think he's trying Jesse, to make a bigger change, and I think that he's showing us some of the behind the scenes of what's going on in our own government. I mean, one of the problems, as we pointed out about that 101 freeway accident, was that a lot of the blame should be put on the DOT in California.
The Caltrans.
Right, Caltrans. Because that accident probably would have been either mitigated or kept from happening at all if they had repaired that piece of road. And yet that was never...
They just repaired the way. I just drove by about a week ago. It wasn't repaired, but they just repaired it a few days ago. Think about how, and with all of this publicity, by the way, I did reach out to the media department. They have a specific media department. They have not returned my call at all, which is, pretty unusual for a government organization. Obviously, I'm not the only one. So they still don't get it. And I mean, I'm agreeing with you that is probably number one party to blame.
And lastly, probably about that tweet is that it was the timing of it, of the whole accident was so unfortunate for Tesla. I think it could have just been like in order to prevent the stock price from continuing to plummet, Elon was like, does it really matter what's going to happen in a year when Model 3 is selling up the wazoo? I'd rather, I'd rather tell people now, educate people now, and hopefully put my own spin on things before things got out of hand.
That's a good point, because if we remember, the stock was tumbling. It was down at the 250 level.
Everyone thought, they're going to go out of business. That was the news that week, is that everyone thought that they were going to go out of business because the stock had dropped. And I mean,
it was becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Right. But it definitely wasn't that tweet that changed it. And obviously the stock bounced right back. But it's stuff like that where it's like, was that a calculated move? I have no idea.
All right, well, let's leave it alone for now, because I got a couple of other things that I wanted to run by you guys. And the next one is the Model 3 delays, right? So one thing that I agree with you, pretty much everybody else, that the fact that they were able to get this amazing car, I think we can all agree it's an amazing car for the price. And you can argue that, they don't make it at 35,000. Even at 50,000, it's amazing. But whenever it comes out for 35, that's going to be absolutely unbelievable. It's one of the best cars on the market. The only better cars are Model S and Model X. But I think what was bothering a lot of people and me, and you mentioned earlier, well, how do these banks know what's going to happen? Well, Elon Musk doesn't either. And when he was promising 20,000 Model 3s per month, and he was promising that I believe in July, unless you want to argue that he knows nothing about automotive business and manufacturing of cars and just overall is a really, really poor estimator of anything, you would kind of have to think that he kind of knew that 20,000 cars a month from zero really would not be achievable. And I think he's on a third or fourth a try of meeting his own goals and failing at it. And I think now, I know you guys have defended him many times about saying, hey, it doesn't matter, he's doing it, which I agree, he's doing all of these amazing things that he promised. But I think, isn't there something to be said about somebody who's been promising a lot of things and not delivering them on time, especially when it comes to a publicly traded company where, you know, quarterly estimates is something that people and investors take seriously. So when you miss them, your stock goes down, your ability of maybe borrow or raise money goes down, your ability to do a lot of things goes down. What is your opinion about him delivering but consistently, bluntly missing his own goals almost every time?
Well, two things. I've been investing in the stock market since 1983. And back then, quarterly was not a thing. I know it seems hard to believe that, but quarterly, if you talked about quarterly, most people are like, why are you bothering to talk about quarterly? Now everything is quarterly, and that makes absolutely no sense if you're looking at a company that has a long-term vision. When we talk about companies like Apple right now, they don't know what to do with their money. They have more money than they know what to do with. They don't know how to innovate. Tesla's on the other side of that. They have so many innovative ideas, they don't have enough money to get at all of them right away. So when Elon talks about being able to do 20,000 cars and he doesn't hit it, I like that because he's setting a high goal for himself. When he sets high goals, even if he doesn't reach them immediately, he's still set a high goal for his whole corporation. Would it have been better for him to set a low goal and hit it? I guess if you like quarterly reports, it would have. But to me, that's just absurd. And I think we're going to someday switch back off of this whole quarterly idea, and we'll look back and go, why do we judge companies on what they did in a quarter?
Right.
But so I'm sorry, can I just interject? But earlier, you know, we both admitted that, you know, we don't want to trust the banks. They're predicting things because a lot of times they're wrong, right? But isn't that kind of doing the same thing where he's predicting things that are wrong and we're almost saying, yeah, you know, it's Elon. What are you going to do? Shouldn't there be some, you know, either honesty or better estimation of things? If you're going to attack a bank for estimating wrong whether or not you're going to raise money and call it, you know, you're going to call it fake news or boring or whatever, well, shouldn't you not be doing that yourself?
I guess the hard part, though, is if you were to set a completely realistic goal and he hit it, that wouldn't be pushing his company forward fast as he wants to be. He wants to change the world.
Right. If he had set what they ended up hitting at the end of quarter one, 2,000 cars a week, and I mean, when would he have had to set that for that to be accepted as him hitting his goals? I mean, if we go back to when he was talking about the Model 3, I honestly think that the building of the hype, as much as building hype is bad, if you finally do deliver on something, I think that is in and of itself good. I mean, for example, like Zach and I, before we even started our YouTube channel, ordered a Glowforge. Okay. It was the biggest Kickstarter thing ever. Right. And we waited and we waited and we waited and we waited and we continued to wait until 3 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And we finally got our Glowforge in the mail. And they kept saying, you know, we just want it to be good. I can honestly say it's good. And part of me, as much as I hated waiting for it, I'm glad that I have something that works because I have gotten things before, you know, from Kickstarter and also just from other just things that you buy that really aren't there yet. And you get them and you're sort of in this early access kind of feel of like, oh, things are changing. We're making lots of improvements. And at some point they're like, oh, and your hardware isn't supported. And it was like, oh, crap. Like, I kind of wish that you had just waited a year and just developed it, you know, like, and
right. And so that, I guess, feeds to the point. It's like, to keep hearing analysts say, oh, you didn't hit that number, so therefore you've lied to us or you're a failure. No, he delivered.
Right. And this, I mean, yes, he's usually not correct about his timelines, but he's usually correct about what he delivers. And to me, I mean, that's what is important.
And here's the thing:
he's always actually correct on what he delivers. We're completely agreeing on that. Yeah.
But when he says he can do something, he's assuming that everyone else underneath him is working as hard as he is and as smart as he is. And he definitely overestimates that. I completely get that. Like when he said he could do the Falcon Wing doors in the timeline that he said, he assumed that the company he hired to do it could do it. They couldn't do it. Right.
So there are not enough couches at Tesla offices, I guarantee you, that's for people to work as hard as he does, I think.
Right. And I think that's his big overestimation. It's not that he's, I'm going to come up with a number that I can't possibly hit. I think he honestly thinks he can hit that number. So when you said, like, that was absurd, how would he think that he could hit that number? I think that he thinks he's moving up a curve in terms of what he's learned in experience, robots, technology. And I think he's just not always correct.
Right. He's forget it. I don't.
Listen, I can tell you this. Even as he is late with the Model X, with the Model S, with the Model 3, whatever, he is late by so little that in a grain of scheme, like, for example, do you even remember? Well, you probably remember because you're the owner, but I don't even remember how late they were with the Model X. I don't believe anybody outside of our little circle, really, people who keep track of this, even know that Model X was like a year, I think, and 1 month late, right? Just like people, when they're buying these cars, and I'm seeing them like 2 or 3 a day now here, they're not going to remember all of this struggle that we've talked about every day. So I'm with you on that for sure. Yep. So anyway, and as you guys know, we're agreeing on more than maybe it appears to people. But like, I had another question about just Tesla not treating us media as well and stuff like that. But you know what? I actually rather move on to something that I would like to get your opinion on. So let's move on from Tesla, right? Because my channel used to be called Everything Tesla because everything that was electric cars I thought was Tesla. I mean, like, you yourself know that Nissan Leaf, to me, it wasn't even a reasonable car. even I think you, Jesse, agree. But once I started seeing what's coming up and all of the exciting cars that are coming out now, right? We're talking about Porsche Mission E. We're talking about the Jaguar I-Pace, and of course Byton, Lucid Air, Faraday Future, and all of the other startups. And I see so much excitement. I am excited about what's happening, and I wanted to hear, because remember there was an iPhone and everybody that came out was like, oh my God, this is like unbelievable. It was a Tesla of phones. But then Android came along and kind of slowly squeezed its ways. In some ways now Android is better, and there's actually way more Androids now than iPhones and so forth. What do you guys think about this Android generation that's coming up? Are there any cars that you like or even suggest to others, or maybe considering yourself?
Yeah, so we just visited a car company in Sweden called Unity, and they are coming up with a very tiny, the first one that'll be out is a 2-seater, and the seats are actually front and back, which is the first I've seen of that configuration.
Right.
And we're excited about this company because they have so many cool innovations. One of them is that you can remove the battery, a part of the battery from the car, and it's like a suitcase size, and you can bring it home, bring it to work, and it's about 30 kilometers of charge.
Right,
so,
and you can plug it in and charge.
Right.
So that way, if you are, live in an apartment or something and you can't run an extension cord outside, out your window to charge your car, you can at least charge it up to enough to get you somewhere reasonable.
And then another cool thing about this car is it's going to allow you to use the power in the car to charge other cars, which is kind of a first that I've seen. I mean, there's been lots of talk of doing that, but this will be one of the first that I'll see. And so, yeah, we're really excited about this Unity car because it's tiny. It fits a niche that I haven't seen be fit right now. It's so small that you could fit like 2 of them in a regular parking space.
Right.
And it fits the whole urban environment that you need, mobility, and you don't need the super duper range, but you need things like this, being able to charge it, on the go. And so we're really excited about that car.
Right.
Yep. Go ahead. No, go ahead, Jesse.
And looking at the larger pool of electric vehicles that are coming out, I mean, it's really exciting. I don't know if you saw my excitement over how boring the Hyundai Kona looked, but for me,
I did.
It was like I couldn't believe how unexciting it was, and to me how exciting that made it for me, because you go outside and you're so used to seeing boring looking cars. And for so long, electric cars they've always put some kind of design element in it that made you think, ooh, look at me, I'm an electric car, like the Leaf. I mean, holy smokes, it kind of looks like the Juke, I suppose. But I mean, my car looks crazy with the headlights and everything. They've always put such innovation on the outside, i3 and stuff like that, that it's a breath of fresh air to see some EVs that are not exciting looking. I don't know why I care so much about the design, but obviously the range is really the most important thing if you boil down to it. The range and the charging options. So the hardest part for me in looking at all of these other electric car companies, or not electric car companies, all these other car companies that are trying to make electric cars, is that they don't have much of a charging network. Obviously, Ionity is going to be great in Europe. They just made their first supercharger. It has 350 kilowatts of capacity. That's fantastic, and I can't wait for that to be available to everyone. But it's not there yet, and so for me, it's like when people are asking me about electric cars, do I want to tell them about a car that they could buy now, like the Model 3, or do I want to tell them about like the I-Pace or something, where it's like, it has the range, it has all the wonderful things that you get with having electric propulsion, but at the same time, are you going to be able to use it for basically all of your applications that you need it for? And I think that's the other part, is looking at everyone else. Like, because I can accept that my car can only go 60 miles in the winter, right? I can be like, okay, I can deal with that. That's enough for me to get to work and back, and probably stop at the grocery store. But for a lot of people, it's like, what are you talking about? Like, I need to be able to drive up to New Hampshire. I need to be able to go across the country if I need to. And right now, the only thing that can do that is a Tesla. I mean,
and I can't agree with you more. I know, you almost sound like you're embarrassed to have this opinion. I love that you're saying that, because I think boring is good when it comes to this car manufacturers. Whenever they try to produce a car that looks like an electric car, Nissan Leaf, BMW i3, I can go on and on and on, and try not to throw up in my mouth. But now when they actually look like regular cars, people don't have to know that it's electric. As a matter of fact, like a lot of people here in the Bay Area, they're buying Teslas because it's an environmentally friendly thing, or because it's electric, or because it's quiet. They're buying this car because it's the best car in the market and they can afford it. So with the same concept, if you think about it, when people look at Kona EV or Kia Niro EV is kind of a sister a car, right? They're saying, oh my God, they look exactly like the cars that I know, and the fact that it's electric is just not going to bother me because I can't really see it, right? So I think there's more to that point than I even think that there is, Jesse. And and granted, the charging network is not there. I mean, we just talk about superchargers not being enough for even people like me sometimes. And we do have Electrify America coming up, and Porsche just announced their own network of 500 fast chargers that they're going to allow everybody else to use. So we do have that kind of coming up to match the supply. But what do you think about more like a high-end cars that are probably going to compete with Tesla, like Jaguar I-Pace, Mission E by Porsche, Audi e-tron, and so forth? Any of them kind of, is that something you would consider? Or what do you think about those?
I think the only reason, and correct me if I'm wrong, Zach, the only reason that you got a Model X was, first, you wanted a Tesla, you wanted a Model S, and then you were like, I really wish it was all-wheel drive because we're in New England and there's snow. And then they announced the Model X, and the Model X had four-wheel drive or all-wheel drive. And you were like, well, bingo, that's my car. I wanted an electric car, and there was no other car in the market that you could have conceivably bought and then being able to use as your primary car. And I think that's the key, is primary car versus secondary car. In most households, you're going to have one or, usually two cars. In, the broader American dream landscape of America, right? You have a primary car and you have a secondary car. The primary car is, the car that gets used the most. It's the car that you would take on a cross-country trip. It's the minivan. It's the SUV. That you wonder why so many people have SUVs and minivans and they don't use most of the capacity of them, at least on the SUV side. Is because sometimes they do, and they're like, well, good thing I have my SUV because I could put the canoe on the top and drive to the lake. And I think that there's always usually that secondary car. And a lot of times it's going to be used by a younger person, someone who doesn't need to go on some crazy road trip. And in fact, their car probably couldn't make it on a road trip because it would fall apart. It's those kinds of cars that I think are going to be replaced with electrics because they don't need to go very far. It would be great if they didn't need that much maintenance, and can live at home for most of the time. They're the either the commuter car or something like that. And even now you could conceivably do that. Like, I have a used Leaf. It's kind of like a secondary car. If I needed to go somewhere far, I would bug you and be like, hey, can I borrow the Model 3 or the Model X, right?
Yeah.
And Tesla for now has been the primary car. They sold something that could be a primary car because of the Supercharger network. And if there wasn't that, like there isn't right now with a lot of these other cars, then it just can never be that primary car.
Yeah, and I like your point. The I-Pace, to me, for instance, is missing two factors. It's got no supercharging network, and it's got a battery that is not cutting edge battery. The reason why these manufacturers like Jaguar are putting out these expensive cars, they can't put out a whole lot of cars like the Model 3 because they don't have the battery capacity yet because they haven't been investing in it. And that's the kind of the untold like secret sauce story here that Tesla has been investing in that none of these other car companies, maybe Nissan a little bit, but and LG, which isn't its own car company, they don't have the batteries to back up their cars yet. So they have to start with these high-end models, and they think they're repeating what Tesla did with, let's start with a high-end model. But Tesla needed to do that to create their brand. Jaguar's already got the brand.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, so this is why I'm actually considering either the Jaguar I-Pace, but I'm also considering the Kia Niro EV that, they're supposed to start in low 30s. And after incentives, we're talking about like 20s or so. So I feel like we're getting more and more alternatives. And the only difference right now is the fast charging network. I can't think of anything else. I mean, the pricing is obviously once Tesla loses their federal incentive, if it's not like extended, then they're really going to have an upper hand on the pricing.
I think what you just mentioned, you didn't mention one thing, which was Autopilot. I think that you're kind of jaded about your Autopilot, and so you're
spoiled.
Thinking, you're spoiled, and you're thinking this is all it can do, and it's not that much. It's not that fun a gadget. But I think that Autopilot, when it gets to basically what Elon hopes to do, which is level 5 autonomy, which it's going to do. The question is only when. Then the car becomes a completely different object. It is no longer something you have to drive yourself. And we cannot imagine that right now because it hasn't happened yet, but it's going to happen. When that day happens, all bets are off.
Right. In relation to Jaguar, though, the one thing that Jaguar or Porsche could do, and I mean, and Porsche has said that they're going to do this is to make a charging network. But I feel like, they're established enough where they could just kind of do it. They could just kind of like just make one real quick. If they made one that went up and down the California coast, hitting all the spots that you'd want to drive your Porsche Mission E along, do that first. Like, I mean, let's face it, you're selling a Porsche. You're not selling a family sedan or an SUV. You're selling a Porsche, and you show it driving on mountain roads. Go find all the mountain roads along California.
Yeah.
That's where the people are going to be buying these cars. Let's be real. And just put in a bunch of superchargers. I mean, if they did that, I would be singing a completely different tune, and with the promise of the rest of the country being blanketed with them. Because, I mean, yes, it's a big expenditure, but if they truly, and this is where the vision thing for me is the problem. A lot of these companies just they lack the vision to be like, you know what? if we did have like a charging network, even if it wasn't the best charging network, if we had one in the future, I think we would, be glad that we had one. I mean, Tesla is kind of the key example here because, again, they're the only example. But like, don't you think that Elon is glad that they have a supercharger network? It must just be a relief every day. You wake up and you're like, how can people charge? Oh, there's the supercharger network. Don't worry about it. Whereas, the Jaguar guys, they're going to wake up in the morning and they're going to be like, I wonder how all those people are charging their cars right now.
I'm glad you brought up vision, and this is the last thing I want to talk about before I'll let you guys go. Obviously the vision that Elon Musk had, 10 years ago to have it all realized now was absolutely out of this world, right? And not just with the Tesla, where we're talking about, I just did a segment on one of the first, solar roofs customers here, and I literally touched it, and it was like freaking roof that collects some, and the boosters landing at that is absolutely unbelievable. But not that not to compare, and I guess people compare him all the time, Elon Musk to Steve Jobs, and Tesla to Apple, but obviously every leader, right? Every leader that innovates and everything at some point runs out of stuff. There's only so many things you can do with an iPhone, and therefore it's much faster, easier to copy. And you can argue that Apple had stopped innovating. Do you think this is something that is either can happen to Tesla or is happening now, where they are working more on expanding their brand, like coming up with a more affordable car rather than necessarily in inventing something amazing tomorrow, and therefore the competition will catch up? Or do you think that Elon Musk has it in his soul to continue innovating and bringing something amazing to us every day? And if so, what do you think that would be next?
I don't think that Elon really cares much further beyond this point, honestly. I think that he knows the impact that Tesla has had on the world, and we're talking about it in the Jaguar, for instance. I mean, it's unbelievable that a British car manufacturer of a car, it's a real car, drives like a car, like a Jimmy, a Clarkson, thumbs up car company would make an electric car, is completely out of this world. And it's exactly that is what his innovation and vision.
And let me interrupt one more time, because I had James Cook on a show a few weeks ago, and he had this brilliant title of one of his videos. It said one of the greatest Tesla inventions, the Jaguar I-Pace. And I thought that was exactly what you're saying.
Exactly. Yeah. Wow. Props to him, because exactly it's he didn't. I mean, if he really wanted to be competitive, he would have not opened his patents. Right. Let's face it. He really, really wanted to change transportation as we know it, and that's exactly what happened. And the innovation that he's going to continue to bring, it might not be electric cars, but it's obviously going to be space travel, and it's obviously going to be boring underground.
Just like The Economist, right?
Exactly. I mean, I think that he shows that he's really, this is one of the things that he set out to accomplish, to really change the world with, and he's succeeded so far. I mean, it's amazing that car companies that went from saying we will never produce an electric car to being like, we're going to electrify our fleet in the coming years, is just like a whoa. Like, maybe was it going to already happen? Maybe, but at the same time, you can't honestly look at it and be like, yeah, but he didn't have anything to do with it. Like just, you can't, right?
I mean, we saw Brian Williams a couple months ago do a broadcast where he talked about how America needs Elon Musk to fix our infrastructure, our bridges, our trains, our roads, and all of this stuff is what Elon is having an effect on. Whether or not he himself is going to do the innovation, or whether he's just inspired someone who's 12 years old right now to go do that, that's the amazing part about him, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think at a certain point, he's not really going to care if Tesla sinks or floats, as long as they were put out of business by an electric car company. Like
let's just think about it. I mean, I first of all, I agree, but my brain has never put those thoughts in such an interesting manner. I think what you're saying is only kind of proves maybe he's a bigger genius than we think, right? And his bigger cause is more than we can maybe even comprehend right now. Because I think, like for me, I cover news. I cover electric car news. My job is to, question, analyze, and see what's next. But what's happening right now, it's less philosophical, right? But I think it's the only way to kind of look at him as overall a contributor to this world, right? As a philosophical. And I think what you said is probably reflects almost everything in just that one sentence. I might use that as a title as a video, as a matter of fact.
I think that he would absolutely resign Tesla when when GM is selling all electric cars and that's all they sell. When some electric car company, maybe like a Rimac or something like that, outclasses his Roadster. Like, I think he's not going to be like, crap, when he's going to be like,
I want to go one step further, though. I don't think it's just EVs. I think he wants to get to level 5 autonomy. I think
that's true.
Those electric vehicles, we cannot picture a world yet in which it's basically Uber, autonomous Uber, where you just call for a car, because that means a whole lot less cars. And it means that we are freed up to do more creativity. We're no longer stuck in traffic. Your problem of getting to LA in 5 hours is no longer a problem.
Right. You would have slept for 8 or 5 hours.
Right.
That would help a lot.
Huh?
That would help a lot.
Yeah. Right.
Sleep last night instead of driving and supercharging.
A much better sell, right? And you could keep your car conceivably until you weren't allowed to drive it anymore.
Yeah, it'll be called the Sleep Company.
Yes.
And I mean, that's obviously, it's just the beginning. I mean, you could order a masseuse in a car. You could order a storyteller. You could just have a bunch of people who want to talk about sports or EVs in a car. Maybe not EVs. That seems a little niche for right now. And probably in the, it'll be boring by the time that happens. But I mean, there's so much innovation that we still haven't gotten to yet. We're right in the middle of it. Mostly just because it extends out as far back as, the beginning of time and continues forward until whatever the heat death of the universe.
I mean, we haven't even talked about some of his innovations, like the BFR, the fact that he has the plans for an intercontinental flights that are 45 minutes to, anywhere in the world. Like, that is such an amazing game changer. Right. And that's going to be happening in the next few years, if you believe his timetable. So that's amazing. I don't think we have to worry that he's going to run out of ideas. The ideas he already has in place are more than we can even handle.
Right. I mean, but going back to actually like Tesla and like what can Tesla innovate? I think that obviously, different car models and stuff, it's going to be really exciting to see what they come up with, because clearly they take a slightly different approach than most. I mean, they're allowed to take a different approach to most car companies and invent a car from the ground up.
Look at the truck that holds a truck.
Yeah, if you believe that that's a true
I do
a true thing. But is it going to be a Tesla hatchback? Is it going, there could be all of these things, but I think that what will eventually happen is that Tesla is going to pivot, just like a lot of car companies are probably going to pivot at the same time, over to a box on wheels that's just like, hey, put your store in a box that is on wheels and is autonomous and can drive anywhere, or ship things in a box, or people in a box on wheels. I think it's going to be that. Like, it's just going to switch, and we're all going to be left just gawking at what.
I know I said it was going to be my last question, but I do have a last question. Where do you think we're going to be a year from now? If I interview you guys in 1 year from now, when I have 15 subscribers, where would we be? What were we going to be talking about?
A year from now, we're going to be on the verge of the Model Y coming out at the end of that year. So I think Model Y will be the rage to talk about, because it'll be an even bigger car than the Model 3. We're also going to be talking about the semi-truck, because that'll be close to coming out. And then soon after, the Roadster. I think all these things came out and we saw pictures and we wrote in them, but they weren't like real yet. And I think those are all going to be getting even closer to reality, and they're going to be super exciting.
I have a different thing that we're going to be talking about. We are going to be talking about how insanely popular Tesla is, because right now, and I've touched on this a couple different times in different places, but the popularity of Tesla is really because since they don't advertise, they just do not hit the mainstream market, and they don't hit, middle America. I mean, we've driven through middle America and people were like, what on earth are you driving?
Can I ask you a question, Alex? I mean, we bumped into 3 people in the last day who didn't know what our car was. Okay. Do you experience that on your coast?
Not at all. I mean, so once in a while, so I go to Santa Cruz. We have this kind of a beach town where a lot of tourists come. So if I do get it, it's when tourists come up to my car. Right. But it's still like they would still kind of know what it is and would take pictures. But for somebody to ask me what car it is this?
I mean, you're in a bubble. You're in a place in the
I'm
world.
in a complete bubble.
Right. And what I'm saying is Tesla is going to get into all of these other different bubbles. The Model 3 is not just going to be a good selling car. It's going to be the first experience Tesla, people have with Tesla. And that's going to be pretty crazy because it's going to come from someone that they know. It's going to come from their friend or their coworker who's going to drive up one day. And I mean, the Model 3 is a good looking car. Let's just get that off the table right now. It's a good looking car. There's no way to deny that. And people are going to obviously ask, what kind of car is that? Because they're going to go through their catalog of cars in their brain. They're going to say, that one's missing. I don't know what that is. Is that a Porsche? Is that what is that? And they're going to tell them that it's a Tesla. And then there's going to be about 12,000 more questions that person is going to need to ask. And there's just no way that an advertisement can do that. And I think that that's kind of a smart way that Tesla has been like, let's save ourselves some time. Like, we're going to need to explain too much to people who have like driven gas cars their whole lives to be like, hey, this is a car. It's completely different than your car. Blah, 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 blah. Like, they couldn't rattle off all of the different things fast enough. It's going to take months of, you walking over to Dave and be like, all right, but okay, so you charge it. Well, where do you charge it? And then he's like, oh, the Supercharger network. And they're like, oh, well, what's that? And then he shows it to them. And they're like, oh, okay. Wow. And so it's just breaking down all of these different mental barriers in people who have just never even heard of Tesla before. I really think that it's going to be this grassroots thing, and no one's going to really understand that it's happening while it happens. Because, I mean, the Tesla Model 3 is going to be obviously the Tesla's cheapest car ever. Except for Rich rebuilds Model S.
I just had him on for 2 weeks ago. That was an interesting conversation too, by the way.
And I think it's going to reach this audience of environmentalists and people who obviously it's going to reach the environmentalists, but it's also going to reach the people who never thought about it until they thought about it, and then they were like, they get hooked on it because meet
you can't
so
go
many
for a
people.
ride and not go back.
Right. So many.
That's how they got me. That's how they got me. I mean, I when I went to the showroom here, it was like July or even early in the year in 2012. It wasn't a function. You couldn't drive it. And as soon as I walked in, I was like, oh my God, this is what a car is supposed to be. And I within 10 minutes, I put a deposit down and I had it within, by the end of the year. And I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe we haven't have I always say this, we as a humanity have made such an amazing progress. Think about it. We can alter our DNA and prevent a disease, right? We send a person on the moon. We can make boobs look bigger and butts look smaller, right? We literally alter ourselves. But one thing we still do to get from point A to point B is we have to blow up this disgusting goo that comes out from the ground in countries that hate us, and we have to blow it up 1,000 times to get moving and then breathe this. Is that how are we not embarrassed by this, right? So when I saw this car, I was like, thank you. Who's making this? Where can I give you my money, please?
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think it's hitting just a different demographic of people, and it's going to geographically reach different areas. And it's going to be, and another thing is, it's not going to come from someone who can afford a Model S or Model X. That person in the parking lot, you're not going to get that Model S or Model X owner, not to dig on any of us, but someone who can afford a Model S or a Model X might not be able to have the same kind of conversation, the peer-to-peer conversation, as someone who can, save up to buy a Model 3. Like someone like me who's like, I'm still I got my email, I am still saving to buy my Model 3. and someday I will buy it and then it will be mine. But until that day, like, those kinds of people are going to be able to have a much different conversation than people who are driving a Model S, because it's going to be a lot less like an alien landing from another planet and being like, this is my spaceship, check it out, it can go so fast. And it's going to be a lot more like, yeah, these are the specs, this is what it can do, and you respect me, I respect you, this is the thing. Like, it's so different. It's going to be awesome. I mean, I think that it's something that Zach and I are actually able to talk to people about. But I think that a lot of Model S and Model X owners would probably struggle with. That, I don't know. That's my thought. And I think that in a year, it might not be happening and it might not be in the news, but it's definitely going to be. I mean, it will be happening, but it won't necessarily be in the news. We might not be talking about it.
News, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, listen, I hope so. And, I appreciate this conversation. You have no idea how. I mean, I've always loved talking to you. I always love watching your show. And I think I feel like you guys were the really only ones I could have this conversation, because I bring all of this stuff up on my channel. But, I either get the strolls that, comment or I have people who just don't maybe even know enough to be able to have the conversation. So like I've tremendously enjoyed this. I mean, obviously my whole goal of today was to have a debate rather than basically hug and kiss for an hour and a half. I think we all know that we're on the same team. We're playing for the same team. We both love Tesla. Some of us more, some of us less. Doesn't really even matter at the end of the day. We think that Elon Musk is absolutely an exceptional human being who's changing the world without really having to. Really, he could have just bought an island and chill there. But so I really appreciate not only just coming on my show and being friends of the show, but being in front of this movement. Obviously your channel is one of the biggest ones out there. You guys are pushing everybody forward and kind of keeping everybody in check. So I greatly appreciate it. I'm sure we could go for another 5 hours or so, but I'm sure we have other things to do for the rest of the day.
We got time. Yeah, let's keep it. I really want to thank you, Alex. It was really good. And, it's nice that we didn't have to hug and kiss for an hour, but it's also good that, we didn't have a shouting match for an hour. I think it's good that having a spirited debate is always
that I will have with my dad later when we talk about electric cars, right? You guys somehow managed to figure this whole father-son thing out, but not
only for hour and a half stints. Trust me.
That's an hour and 25 minutes more than I'm able to talk to my dad about. So, and yet I still keep coming over there and having dinner. I don't know why, but listen, guys, always glad to see you. Now, listen, I can't imagine anybody watching not knowing where your channel is at. And now it's called. The description of this video has it. I'm going to put up a card over there as well for those of you who live under the stone, never not just watch the channel, obviously subscribe to it. You guys do news. You also do a lot of other tech related and nerd related stuff, really. So thank you so much for coming on the show. I hope we will continue this conversation. I hope we'll see you guys at a next event, Tesla event, or maybe just electric car event, Yeah. So I really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Alex. That was so much fun.
All right, we'll see you at we'll see you in a semi or something like that.
Yeah,
something fun.
I love that.
Spin. We'll go for a spin.
I love that.
All right.
All right, guys. So just as I mentioned before, please make sure to check out their channel. It's really, if you're even an electric car enthusiast, definitely if you're a Tesla enthusiast, this is just basically a must-watch channel. At the very least, the Tesla Time News is something you absolutely need to watch. Again, the description of this video has the link. And don't forget about next week. I'm going to have John LaFleur, the VP of Vehicle Program there at Workhorse. Also another interesting company that's kind of gearing up to produce some really cool electric vehicles, actually delivering some of them now. And Henrik Fisker, the CEO of Fisker, going to be here talking about their e-motion car that's coming up next year. Really, it's getting kind of close. Also want to talk to him about the solid state batteries, something that I'm also very, very interested in. All right, well, listen, guys, it's been the longest interview I've ever had, but I think this is the biggest, the most fun I've had. So thank you to Zach and Jesse for doing this. And so other than that, I will see you guys next time, and remember to stay charged.